it's Alex and welcome to Hey Little Thrifter. Today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in December. I read mostly horror and yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag of a month, but overall pretty good. First up, I read a point horror book, if you can see the blank spot on the wall here, and it is Camp Fear by Ellis. This one is set at a summer camp and we're following a bunch of teenagers who are there before all the kids arrive for the summer. So there are two older camp counsellors who are kind of overseeing everything, and then several teenagers who are joining them to get things ready. And it turns out that a few of these teenagers used to go to the same camp back when they were kids, and several years ago one of the children one summer died, and it seems like this secret from the past is now coming back to haunt the camp again. This one was pretty good. It was mostly enjoyable. You know, there were a lot of red herrings and twists and turns, and it was actually really sad for the most part. It was much sadder than I realised it was going to be, but it does touch on the theme of bullying and how that can really affect someone. And yeah, it was just kind of heartbreaking, quite honestly. So yeah, not quite what I expected, because normally they're pretty fun, but I think for the intended audience it's definitely a very worthwhile and important topic to have included in a book like this. So I thought this one was good and I gave it 3 stars. Next up, I read Ghost Story by Straub, and this is one I've been meaning to read for a really long time, and it was finally time for me to pick it up. And this is the story of a group of friends. They're all now older gentlemen and they've been friends for a number of years, and they always meet up at one of their houses and they kind of have this like boys club. Something happened to them when they were all younger, and it's a bit of a dark secret amongst the group, and it has kind of plagued them for all these years. And this is a very highly regarded book within the horror genre. It's probably one of Straub's most famous ones, and I just went into this expecting that I was going to love it as much as everyone else seemed to, and I had really mixed feelings about it. I thought the good bits were excellent. I really enjoyed a lot of it. There were some really absorbing parts to the story and a lot of really creepy moments as well. But there were also parts of the story that I found really dry. It dragged quite a bit. It actually was quite a slow read for me. I really had to force myself to get through it at times. So yeah, I was kind of a bit sad to not enjoy this as much as I thought I would. I still did like it a lot overall, but like I said, it was a really mixed experience for me. So overall I gave it 3 stars. Let me know if you've read this and let me know what you thought. I'd be really interested to talk about it. Okay, next up is a book that, you know, there are those books that everyone seems to love, but for whatever reason you have zero interest in reading it. But one day the hype just gets to you and you think, why not? Maybe I'll give it a go and see what all the fuss is about. Maybe I'll really like it too. And then you realise you should have stuck to your gut and not bothered, because it really wasn't your cup of tea after all. That book for me was Nosferatu by Joe Hill. This is about a villain called Charlie Manx who is able to whisk children away to another world called Christmasland, where every day is Christmas. And the story also follows a character called Vic, who is also able to travel to worlds like Christmasland. And the premise honestly didn't really intrigue me, but I'd heard so many great things about it, I thought I'd give it a go. And I was looking for an audiobook to listen to in December, and I've heard great things about the audio version, and my library had it available, so I figured, why not? If I'm ever going to read it, December is probably the best time to do so. And to begin with, I was pleasantly surprised. I was actually quite enjoying it. I was enjoying getting to know the characters, I was becoming invested in Vic, and I was enjoying the story and wanted to see where it went. But it was when we joined Vic as an adult, some years later, that I just lost interest, and it didn't hook me back in after that. Yeah, it just wasn't for me. I just didn't really enjoy it. I didn't like any of the characters. I didn't care about them. I thought that the villains, Charlie and Bing, were way too like cartoonish to be scary or really threatening. It was also really long. The audiobook I think was about 20 hours. So yeah, I don't know why I put myself through that, honestly. I should have just given up when I knew it wasn't for me. And yeah, I can't really put my finger on why, but it just wasn't my thing, and I gave it 2 stars. I do have a copy of Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill on my shelf, and that's one that the premise does sound quite interesting to me, so I would like to give that one a go at some point, but I think after Nosferatu I'm not really rushing to it. But I'll give it a go one of these days, and I guess maybe that will determine if I'm a Joe Hill fan or not. Next up is Rabid Heart by Jeremy Wagner, and the author sent me this copy for review. And this is a zombie novel, and we're following Rhonda, who is in her early 20s. She used to have a pretty good life. She was engaged to be married, she worked as a hairdresser, and things were pretty good. And then there was an outbreak of necro-rabies, which turned most of the population into zombies. So she is now one of the survivors who is living at a military base, and they're all trying to survive. They go out on recce's to see if they can find anyone else that has survived. And one of these recce's goes to her old hometown, and she happens to find her fiance, who is now a zombie. And so ensues an action-packed, gore-filled love story of sorts. This was a lot of fun, it was fast-paced, and it had a lot more heart and emotion than I at first realised, and I gave it 3 stars. Next up I read Naomi's Room by Jonathan Aycliffe. This was another one I've had on my shelf for ages and have been meaning to pick up, and really wanted to do so before the end of the year. And this is a ghost story. It's set in England. This is about a couple with a 4-year-old daughter called Naomi, and one Christmas Eve the father is out Christmas shopping with her and she goes missing. And this isn't a spoiler, it is there on the back of the book, but soon afterwards Naomi is found murdered. The story is told from the father Charles's perspective, and it's told sometime after this event has occurred and what happened over time since then. Even though I knew that basic premise going into it, it didn't stop that part of the story being incredibly emotional and heartbreaking. And following on from that, we get into the supernatural element of the story, and that was really atmospheric, really well done, and there were some genuinely creepy scenes that, yeah, really got under my skin, and it was excellently written. Some of his writing was really beautiful. I'd definitely like to read more by him. And without giving anything away, the story does go to some dark places that I wasn't expecting it to go, and overall I really enjoyed it and I gave it 4 stars. Next up I read A Deep Horror That Was Very Nearly Awe, which is a short story collection by J.R. Hamantaschen, and the author sent me this copy to review. I had first heard about this author on Carla at Carla's Book Bits channel, and she had reviewed it recently and it sounded really interesting. She really enjoyed it too, and yeah, the author got in touch with me and very kindly sent me a copy. These stories were excellent and really unique. They are all kind of set in like a familiar world with normal people and everyday situations, but there's always something weird going on. There's either a strange situation or something unsettling that's happening, or just a sense of dread running throughout. And I thought the mix of the everyday and this psychological horror was really well done. I really enjoyed the whole collection. I just read it through from start to finish, and there were some similar themes or elements that cropped up in more than one story, which I thought was really interesting and well done. I gave this one 4 stars, and yeah, definitely recommend it if you're looking for something different. And last up, I read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and I'd never read this before. I don't know why or how. Yeah, I hadn't been purposely avoiding it, but for whatever reason I just hadn't grabbed it. But I had made it a goal to do so before the end of the year, and I did pick it up towards the end of December. I didn't quite finish it by the end of the month. I did end up finishing it on January 1st, but I'm still counting it. And of course, this is an incredibly famous and influential story about a scientist who creates a creature out of body parts and reanimates it. And I knew the basics of the story. I think it's hard not to know something about Frankenstein just from it being within popular culture. But there were so many things in here that I just had no idea were part of the story. It's crazy to think how, like, the 30s film adaptation, so much was changed in that, whereas I stupidly assumed that it was quite true to the book, when in fact it isn't. Even the fact that we start off with a completely different character and then the story is told to him just blew my mind. I had no idea that that was how this story went. It was just crazy. And yeah, the creature is completely different to what we now know of Frankenstein's monster in popular culture. I really enjoyed this. It was awesome to finally read such a famous and influential book. Overall, I gave this 4 stars. There were a few parts that I thought were a bit dry and slow, and not as compelling as the rest of the story, but yeah, there's no denying what an impressive book this is. Mary Shelley wrote this when she was quite young, so yeah, I'm glad that I finally picked this up and now I know the story of Frankenstein. It's still kind of blowing my mind that, yeah, I thought I knew the story and I didn't, and it's definitely one that I think would benefit from a reread at some point. I also hear really good things about the 1818 version, so I would like to pick that one up at some point too. So that was everything I read in December. Let me know if you've read any of these and let me know what you thought, or tell me what your favourite book of December was. I hope you all had a lovely Christmas and Happy New Year to you all. I hope 2019 is an awesome one for everyone. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you again in my next video. Bye!